Hello, you're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher, the programme that brings you news and interviews direct from the Holy Land to find out what God is doing there today, despite the ongoing conflict. Today I'm talking to Wayne Hilsden, the Canadian pastor of the King of Kings congregation in Jerusalem. He believes we're living in the last of the last days. So I asked him why he came to Israel.
Well, it's interesting. My wife and I are not Jewish. We were very happy in Canada, serving the Lord in ministry. My wife was in Christian television. I was a pastor in a downtown Toronto church. And then suddenly, out of the blue, we met a pastor that was about to move to Israel. And in our first conversation with him, he said, "Would you come and join us and help us start a church in Jerusalem?" It was right out of the blue. We thought it was kind of off the wall and crazy, but we started to pray about it. And we came and did a Spy Out the Land tour in 1981 and met up with this couple that came here ahead of us. And we felt the Lord say, yes, this is where we're to invest our lives.
So it wasn't something you were looking to do, something you were planning to do?
No, it was actually not at all on our radar screen. And in fact, when I was about 19 years old, I hitchhiked all over Europe and North Africa and thought, well, maybe I should visit Israel. I'm kind of close, and never got here and really didn't regret it. So I had really no special interest in Israel in my early adult years.
When you came here, how difficult was it to assimilate with the local believers, both Jewish and Arab believers, and the leaders of the congregations?
Back in those years, it was kind of difficult. If you weren't Jewish or an Arab believer that had been well established in the land. For one thing, people, I think, felt that you need to pay your dues first. And, you know, they paid a price and have been paying a price to live here and kind of expect everybody else to do the same. And that's fair. So it took about 2 or 3 years before we felt we were really accepted fully as part of the body of believers in the land.
Now, if we can just fast forward to today, we're sitting in your office next door to your congregational meeting place, which was a former dingy old cinema that you have transformed.
That's right. It happened in 2002. At the end of the year, we found this theater that was 11 years sitting empty, collecting dust. And we went in with 7 other pastors in the city, Messianic pastors actually, and together prayed if this is the Lord's will for us to go and purchase this and develop it into a sanctuary. And all of us said amen. And it was easy for the other pastors to say amen. They didn't have to raise the money, but we've had their blessing all along. In fact, it was clear from the beginning that we would use this not just for our own purposes, but for the body at large. And we've carried through with that vision.
So the building was completed. How did it change what you did?
Well, for one thing, when you have your own facility, it means that you don't just use it for one service on the weekend. It's open throughout the week. So probably 4 to 5 evenings a week, there's an event at the pavilion. And most of those would still be Christian, Messianic type events, whether they're conferences or concerts or plays or musicals, whatever. And we also open it up to the wider Jerusalem public. We just had 10 schools in Jerusalem, not Christian schools, use our auditorium for their end-of-the-year graduation ceremonies.
Not content with just one building, the cinema, you felt very challenged that you should actually look at the top floor of this tower. And you have converted that into a prayer tower, 24/7 prayer. What's the story behind that?
Well, we built the pavilion, this former movie theater, and actually we were quite content with that. I simply went away on a little prayer retreat and asked the Lord, to help give me a strategy as how, where to go next. And we still had a mortgage to pay. And I just said, Lord, show me how we can do that. And instead of getting an answer to that, he redirected my prayers toward the top floor, actually, of this building we're in, which is a 17-story tower, office tower, as well as a shopping center. And at the top of the building, there was a empty space that had been vacated by an insurance company that had gone, I guess, under. They left all their furniture behind. Looks like they left real quick. And I just felt the Lord say, this is to be a prayer center. And I invited all the prayer leaders of the nation, various ministries, even other prayer houses that have similar visions. They came, they prayed with me, and they felt it was God. And again, we had a wonderful blessing of other prayer ministries, and we went forward. And it's now 4 years old.
In a very strategic position, you've got a 360-degree view. You can see for miles from up there.
We see almost the entire city. There's one little spot we don't see, but all the strategic places from Bible times as well as contemporary buildings like the Knesset, the Parliament of Israel, City Hall, Foreign Ministry, the Bank of Israel, all these key strategic locations. Also the Hebrew University, by the way, and we do think that's very strategic for this country.
So let's look at why God has had you procure these buildings, these properties, and what's going on. What is the bigger picture? What is God doing here, Wayne?
Well, I think he's doing a lot of things. I think we're in the last of the last days. I believe that restoration is one of the big things that God is doing right now. He's restoring the city of Jerusalem. And Psalm 102 talks about the fact that the Lord is building Jerusalem, the fact that people will be back in the city and they will even revere the stones and the dust. And when the Lord builds up Jerusalem, it says he will appear here as well. And so we just believe that he's preparing the city for his arrival. We believe Jerusalem is a kind of bride waiting for a bridegroom. And so we believe that we're just preparing the way. We're removing the stumbling blocks that prevent many Jewish people from seeing their Messiah. Unfortunately, 2,000 years of pretty tragic Christian Jewish history. And so we're rebuilding broken places and trying to remove the walls that stand between both of our peoples and to bring the gospel to this nation.
Have you seen the numbers of new believers increasing, and what sort of background are they coming from?
Well, across the whole nation, we are seeing growth in the body and new believers coming into the kingdom. A lot of these are new immigrants. Some have come with their faith, and so a lot of the growth in the body has been simply the fact that many immigrants that came from the former Soviet Union came with faith in Jesus. But then we're seeing, especially again in that community of Russian-speaking people, many that have come to faith once they've come to the land. And I believe that increasingly we're going to see that phenomenon happening. I think it's in fulfillment of Ezekiel 36 that speaks of a day that the Jewish people will come back from their place of exile, back to the very land that was promised to them, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But here in the land, they have an appointment. I like to say they have a doctor's appointment. They have a meeting with their cardiologist, because it says that he will remove from them their heart of stone and replace it with a heart of flesh. And that happens after they come in the land, according to Ezekiel 36. So we believe that that's the big thing that God's about to do. Restoration of the land and the city of Jerusalem. That's a physical restoration. But the second stage, and the most exciting thing for me, is the spiritual restoration to God himself.
So are there one or two scriptures that you're really hanging on to, that you're really living, that you're really praying into being? What are you anticipating is going to be happening, say, in the next 5, 6, 7 years?
Well, we believe what it says in Romans 11:11, that salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. And I'm a Gentile, I'm not a Jew. And I believe that part of my role and the role of many like me in the land is to live out our lives with integrity, with joy, with the presence of God all over us, and hopefully it'll be intriguing and very inviting to people to say, you guys are different. We kind of like what we see. Tell me more. And, that is happening all the time. It's so easy to share our faith because people ask us. Usually I don't take the initiative. They take the initiative. So that's an exciting thing. So that's part of it. Romans 11:26, the same chapter, says, and all Israel shall be saved. The deliverer will come from Zion. He will take away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. So we stand on that promise that their salvation is coming to Israel. And he's a loving God. He's a merciful judge, and he will save his people.
What is your message to the church in the nations, the church in the West in particular? What is their role in all of this?
Well, in relation to Israel, one is to pray. And we see the burden of prayer that the Apostle Paul had for his own people. It was a prayer that really was with him all the time, I believe. And it was a constant hope and expectation that his own people would come to faith. And he continued to preach to his people as well. And even though he was Jewish, he said, I'll become a Jew to reach a Jew. So in many ways, he expressed his faith in a Jewish way, in a Jewish context. And, more and more people in this land are doing the same and are coming to appreciate our Jewish roots and that we're not cut off from those roots. And one thing I would say to the church is reach out to Jewish people wherever you meet them. You may be working with Jewish people. You may be at school with Jewish people and speak their language and come to know your own Hebrew roots so that when you talk to them, you're not talking about a foreign religion, But Christianity is really a fulfillment and completion of the Jewish faith that we find in the Hebrew Scriptures. So praying, proclaiming, those are the two keys, I think, at this time for the church.
Finally, we can't leave this interview without talking about the Palestinian Christians, particularly those that really understand God's heart, as you've just been describing. What would you say about them?
Well, the Palestinian believers are in a very difficult position, between a rock and a hard place. They are under suspicion by their own people from the Islamic faith, and they're not fully accepted among the Messianic believers, and that's a sad situation. Although we're seeing an increasing reconciliation movement, we're seeing more and more gatherings of Jews and Palestinian believers together. We are seeing the one new man expression more and more. I thank God for that. But there's a lot more to go. And I also believe that the salvation of Israel ultimately will be a key for world harvest, including Israel's neighbors and Palestinians across town, because when they come to faith, it'll be like resurrection from the dead, it says in Romans 11:15, for the whole world. So the Palestinians are going to benefit from Israel's salvation. And what's really cool is when I see Muslim people come to faith in Jesus, many times they get a vision for God's purposes for Israel and the salvation of the Jews, and they have a love for the Jewish people. It's pretty remarkable, actually. But that just proves to me that it's God that's doing this, and God is at work in these latter days.
Wayne Hilsden, pastor of the King of Kings congregation in Jerusalem. And you're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher, the programme that seeks to find out what God is doing in the Holy Land today and how we can get involved. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a small charity based in the UK that supports needy believers living in Israel and the Palestinian areas. We'd like to send you our free bi-monthly newsletter. You'll find articles, programmes and information about our tours to Israel on our website, www.olivetreefund.org, where you can also leave a donation. So if you'd like more information, do get in touch. You can email inquiries@olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, at the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund, PO Box 850, Horsham, RH12 9GA in the UK. I'll be back at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.